Hi everyone, I'm filming this video immediately after the last one. This one because I just finished up my long series about everything wrong with It Happened to Nancy by the late fraud Dr. Beatrice Sparks. I kept it in at 200 reasons, although I could have easily kept going and going and going. This video is going to be fairly detailed synopsis and general review of the entire book. So, let's just get going and start ripping it apart yet again. I hate this woman so much. Sweet, naive, 14-year-old Nancy is really excited to go to a Garth Brooks concert with her BFFs, Dory, Elle, and Red, or as Dr. Fraud constantly calls them, Dory and Elle and Red, because serialists with commas don't exist in her writing universe. Their mothers don't approve of them going to rock concerts, but they decided to allow Garth because he's country, but not just any old C&W star. Instead of standing in place with a guitar and droning about dead dogs and thunder rolls, Garth puts on a wild show equal to any rock concert, and as I mentioned in a previous video, I did some research. He was not giving any shows in any state anywhere in the U.S. on April 14th of either 1990, which matches a perpetual calendar, or 1991 if Dr. Fraud yet again goofed up her dating. Things get even wilder when a minor scuffle about seats in the row in front of Nancy's group immediately turns, how did that happen, into a chain effect free-for-all brawl, like one of the classic Springer fights. Like, for example, viewers battle the Klan and Klan frontation. I have so many happy memories of watching Springer as a teenager and in my 20s, and even now in my 40s. I love watching old episodes and segments on YouTube. I hope someday there's a full DVD box set of all the seasons. And Nancy gets separated from her group, gets her purse stolen, and starts having a severe asthma attack. What a miracle! A handsome, cartoonishly perfect guy named Colin comes to her rescue. Nancy and Colin have an immediate connection, and since Colin claims no one reported Nancy missing, what are the odds of that? They spend the rest of the concert talking in an isolated part of the hall. Colin says he's 18, on the dean's list, and attending a local university on scholarship, and lost his parents in a car accident. He claims he knew how to handle Nancy's asthma attack because his little sister Betsy May also has asthma, and he would have wanted someone to do the same for her if she was having an attack. Where did this dude come from, and why does Nancy believe him? Why is she not alerted by how he's asking all these questions about her parents and just not getting away from him immediately after he helps her? I'm not staying alone with a strange dude. My friends and their aunt and Elle's aunt must be terrified out of their minds because we were separated. Nope, I'm just gonna stay here hanging out with a special dude. Despite growing up in the era of incessant stranger danger warnings, Nancy is only a couple of years older than I am. Nancy trusts him completely and even accepts a ride home from him. What? Nancy selfishly doesn't care she ruined everyone else's evening since she had such a great time with her precious Colin. Who cares if they were worried out of their minds while she was missing for hours? How can you do that? Why doesn't she get punished? Why aren't there police out there prowling for her? They just went home with Nancy missing. What is going on? Again, Dr. Fraud, she was just could not write. She just couldn't write at all. I couldn't keep a consistent, normal, believable, plot line straight, or even a single incident. Who just goes home when someone in the group is missing? What is going on? Nancy and Colin immediately begin having secret dates and talking on the phone almost every day, leaping into an extremely serious relationship instead of taking some time to get to know one another first. Unbelievably, Colin later claims, we started out as dear friends, but now we're like a boy-girl relationship. It kind of always seemed like a boy-girl relationship to me, or were we supposed to believe he didn't think those were dates they were going on? They were just hanging out because they were friends and surrogate brother and sister. What? After all of 10 days, she invites him over at night when Mommykins is out of town on business, which she often is. To avoid her BFF, Elle's mother, coming by to pick her up for a sleepover, Nancy calls in a panic and pretends she has horrible cramps, and Elle's mother also has a key to the apartment, so she could have dropped by. That would have been great if she had dropped by if the story were real. It could have totally been prevented. Nancy sees nothing suspicious about Colin giving her alcohol, turning all the lights out, or locking all the doors. In fact, she thinks the lattermost, which Elle's mother requested and stayed on the phone until it was completed, is the height of hardy-har-har, thigh-slapping hilarity. Morgue bots are easily amused. As Nancy is opening the door at the stroke of midnight for Colin to leave, which I told him he would have to do, He transmogrifies from Dr. Hyde into Mr. Jekyll and picks her up and carries her to Mommykins' bed to rape her, because apparently it never occurred to him to rape Nancy when they were already kissing on the floor. Nope, it has to be at that exact moment, and can only happen on a bed. What rapist thinks like that? I have prior videos about how, the assault and its aftermath make no sense, as well as how the relationship and how they get together, that also makes no sense, and it's like insulting to actual victims of SA, and there's no PTSD or just anything like that. And also, what actual groomer who's actually, wants the victim to not fight him and stuff and just happen normally? Oh, she'll call the cops if this goes wrong. Who spends all of 10 days earning a victim's trust and sweet talking her, stepping up the courtship, whatever? The average groomer spends 6 to 9 months before he makes the first move. And yes, and most sexually predator groomers are male. This is statistics do bear this out, because it's called grooming for a reason. And by the time he makes the first move, the victim trusts him completely, and he does not have to use force. So none of Colin's actions fit any sort of known standard criminal profile. It's just from the imagination of someone who knew nothing about crime or psychology or real life. She basically lived in the Morador bubble her entire life. Nancy is plunged into shock and trauma and starts obsessing about mortal sins. Dr. Fraud knew nothing about Catholicism. That's basically the only real attempt at developing Nancy as Catholic. Oh, mortal sins are terrible. Oh, mortal sins. Catholic guilt, Catholic guilt, Catholic guilt. Nothing else about her reads Catholic, apart from a couple of offhanded minor mentions of attending mass and Catholic school, or as she says, Catholic parochial school, until the 6th grade. But everything is magically healed a few days later when she confides in Mommykins. That's a big trope in all of Dr. Fraud's books, when the narrator tearfully confides in Mommykins about what's been really happening, and Mommykins is so, immediately loving and forgiving and accepting. Oh, I'll help you, baby. Oh, this was my fault for getting divorced like an evil, wanton woman of the world, and I was away working instead of being at home like a good little Mrs. Husband's first name and full name, and not being working outside of the home. Oh, it's all my fault because I was a modern woman. Oh, just the whole magical Mommykins trope and the anti-divorce attitude, it just makes me so angry. PTSD? What is that? Something dragging down the moral need to bounce back and be Pollyanna ASAP? Nancy doesn't even go to a doctor for anything. Instead, Mommykins takes her on a 4-day beach holiday so they can forget it ever happened, like the 1950s called. Nancy soon has an awesome surprise 15th birthday party, and we're introduced to new love interest Lou, whom she's known since she can remember. Because it's so important to smile and keep sweet. That's another Morgbot phrase. Even after the most soul-shattering trauma, they're dating within a month. Although not officially calling it dating because she's not 16 yet, and Mommykins won't allow her to date until she's 16. What a surprise! Just like a Mormon. Whoever heard of a rape survivor being too traumatized to even consider dating for months or even years afterwards? Just be Pollyanna, Molly Mormon, and pretend it didn't even happen. You're good to go with your nice little Peter Priesthood you should have waited for, like a good little Molly Mormon. Nancy sees Colin with a 13-year-old named Margie and refuses to ring the alarm bell, selfish piece of crap, because she's convinced no one would believe her. Not long afterwards, she sees Margie with her head down and looking very shattered, and knows she was raped too. But that's not important, since I've made a sacred oath to get out of the past and into my foreverish long future, another Mormon phrase. What a selfish POS. She briefly mentions one time, oh, maybe I will call Margie after she found out about the AIDS and stuff, but there's no follow-up on that. No, who cares? Someone else got AIDS and got raped. No one would have believed me anyway, and that would be dwelling in the past and not being Pollyanna. So many things about this book and Dr. Fraud's entire literary canon, so to speak, they just make me so angry. At the start of summer vacation, Nancy and her friends go to Red's family cabin on a lake and have an awesome time. She and Lou continue getting closer during this time. She also loves Red's Uncle Bill's creepy fire and brimstone sermon about sin and repentance. I would be so angry if a child of mine went for what I thought was a nice summer holiday with friends out in a nice little cabin by the lake doing fun type of camping stuff, just having fun hanging out with their friends after school ends. And what? There was a church service they had to go to in the cabin, and it was a fundamentalist Christian, and they heard this evangelical type fundy sermon, like about their constantly sinning and they need to repent, I would be so angry and I would probably forbid them from like hanging out with that friend again, or the friend's parents. Like, oh, I'm lost for words. It's like, and this is a supposed Catholic too. After vacation, Nancy begins feeling mysteriously exhausted and sick. Then Lou dumps her for 3 weeks because they almost had sex. And what a shock, there's almost no details about that, because who cares to write about almost having sex in your own journal, even after she went into detail about Colin raping her? And he's been rabidly anti-sex since age 10, under the childish belief it caused his parents' divorce. Just the abstinence-only propaganda crap. He drags her down the streets at night. What? Until they find a church, and he makes her kneel and promise they'll wait for marriage. Totally unrealistic. Lou is one of the worst fictional boyfriends I've ever read. He's so odious, controlling, sexist, chauvinistic, and dripping red flags. Yet Nancy lovingly does whatever he demands, suppresses her real interest and personality for him, and avoids mentioning her guy friend Adam in Arizona for fear he'll get mad. In late August, Nancy is diagnosed with HIV after her doctor somehow tests her without her knowledge or consent. The results come back in a few days, despite traditional seroconversion, I believe the only type of HIV test available at that time in the early 90s. Those tests take about 2 weeks, and I've been tested for HIV twice as just the standard battery of STD tests at the start of my relationship with my now ex, and then had a second battery of tests 6 months later, which is recommended when you're with a new partner, even if you've never had sex before and that other person has only had sex with one other person. You just want to be safe. So I had to ask for the HIV test with the other STD test. It's not just, I'm just randomly testing your blood when I'm just looking for the vitamins or whatever other things they test your blood for when you're doing a standard labs. That's not a standard test. You have to ask for it. And how did this, does HIPAA exist? I'm just so confused. How did this happen? I know it wasn't a real story at all, but it's just, are we supposed to believe this could actually happen? A doctor just randomly tests your blood for HIV without any reason to think you could have it, and then within a few days already getting the results when seroconversion was the only kind of HIV testing that existed? Nancy starts seeing an AIDS counselor and a supposed therapist who are total failures at their jobs, as Nancy mysteriously never has a chance to ask any questions about HIV/AIDS and gets no real therapy for her trauma. The cops also start investigating Colin, probably only because of the HIV, not because of the rape, which is unfortunately true about many cops all over the world. They just don't take rape or stalking or domestic abuse seriously, yet they fail to find any leads. Eventually, Nancy refuses to cooperate. She'd rather let him continue raping both girls and boys and criminally transmitting HIV than wallowing in my whole load of gagging garbage and pretending ugly things never happened to her. I will read that entry. This is from January 5th, I believe. Sunday, January 5th. Life is still magnificent, glorious and heavenly, with just one horrible battering. The police called and said no one has been able to locate Colin. How, when they know his name and his age, he lied about his age. He was actually 24, not 18. And they know the junior high school he attended. How are they not finding any leads beyond that? Seriously? They wanted to come talk to me some more. I yelled, cue the all caps, no, 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 and broke down completely. I don't know what else they want me to tell them. How about helping cooperate with an investigation that's important? I've dumped my whole load of gagging garbage. Who says gagging garbage? They seem to expect me to go back and wallow in it, wallow in it, wallow in it. For nothing. I won't. They can't make me. The police keep beating me down to a pulp while plus sign, minus sign, asterisks, ampersand, plus sign, underscore. Oh, she did use 6 symbols instead of 5 that time. Continues out there unchecked, spreading his sunshine. Well, hardly sunshine. More like death. But I won't think about that anymore. Come on, Scarlett, help me. Help me think about it next never day. What? I'm lost for words for the umpteenth time. How is she wallowing in bath? She's helping to go into the future by making sure this dude is caught and prosecuted and tried and thrown behind bars and not getting out. Hopefully, ever, maybe even the death penalty, which I do believe they had in that state at that time, presuming she was supposedly really living in South Carolina. It wasn't just a made up place for something else. I'm so lost for her. It's like, oh, I'm going back and wallowing in garbage. She's not even thinking like a mature person, and she's like almost 17 damn years old at this point. Like, what? Nancy keeps her HIV a secret from her friends as long as possible, even going so far as to routinely pretend she's staying by her dad in Arizona to avoid seeing them. And by the time she finally confesses and they're amazingly loving and accepting immediately, it's already progressed to full-blown AIDS. This girl lies or runs away every time she has a problem or doesn't know what to do. Every single time. Nancy's friend Dory gets knocked up by her boyfriend Fred, who later dumps her and denies paternity. Because no single teen mom deserves to keep her baby in Beatrice Sparks' world, Dory of course obediently gives her baby for adoption as soon as she's born. Dr. Fraud well and truly believed no good ever came out of premarital sex and wanted to teach her readers a lesson by only showing automatic negative consequences. Though Nancy had several hospital stays and HIV complications, she never has any serious opportunistic infections. I can't go along with the narrative of her developing full-blown AIDS in less than a year when her health seems quite normal most of that time. Are we supposed to believe she was that immunocompromised, like such severe asthma, that it was like progressing bam, 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 right to death within 2 years, and she's never depicted as an actual immunocompromised person? Like, why is she going to concerts, going to any kind of school, leaving the house if she's that severely immunocompromised? This is such absolute BS. The worst things that happen to her are incontinence, rectal ulcers, emaciation, eye infections, kidney issues, and exhaustion, not blindness, severe pneumonia, cryptococcal meningitis, or bacterial infections, among other things. And of course, I'm not trying to make light of like wetting yourself all the time, even in public, like rectal ulcers, like losing a lot of weight, hair falling out, like hospitalization for eye infections and kidney stuff. But all those things, again, they're like resolved quickly. Like, oh, the good bugs are in charge of the bad bugs. Now you can go back to mommy's house, or now you can go Aunt Thelma in Idaho because you're lying and running away yet again. You just can't face the world, and or you can manage some of these things. Like she just starts wearing diapers for the rectal ulcers and then wetting herself constantly. But this is not like advanced full-blown AIDS depiction. Those things are relatively minor and they heal up, like they get resolved fairly quickly, or she keeps them under control as best she can. It's not like she's like can't even leave her bed because she's like 60 pounds, or like getting like sarcomas all over her body, or just like terrible pneumonia. She's going completely blind. There's like, cuts or open wounds on her legs that just refuse to heal. Anything like that. Did Dr. Fraud ever meet anyone going through late stage AIDS, or even see any like extended video footage of such people? This is such an insulting slap in the face to what AIDS is actually like. And as I was just saying, this book is such a slap in the face to all the people who died of AIDS during the height of the epidemic and who have died since we had antiretrovirals, and the people who lost loved ones to this awful disease. Someone truly deteriorating from late-stage AIDS would not constantly be bouncing back and forth between perfect health and brief hospital stays, if not in and out doctor visits, for fairly minor, manageable issues. Eventually, Nancy goes to stay by her dad in Arizona for real, which was seriously like kicked off because she wet herself at the movies, and she was horrified because all the kids were talking about it. Oh, and yet again, she's lying and running away from problems. Oh, I don't have to deal with the kids when I'm running away. I would be so drunk if I would be so drunk if I drank every time Dr. Fraud calls Nancy's peers the kids. And so when she's in Arizona, she starts her first job. She also makes friends with Adam, a coworker her age, and later starts a band with Adam and his parents. They racistly call themselves the Almost All Red Aboriginals, and I realize that's a play on the last name Allred, A-L-R-E-D, but yikes, particularly given the morgue-bought troubling history with Native American racism. There's just the slightest change in her maturity level when she's away from her enabling mommykins, her immature gaggle, and the repugnant Lou. Alas, Nancy misses mommykins and her BFFs too much, and can't deal with the kids at her new school, failing to roll out the red carpet for her. What? Seriously? After only about a week, she's had a home school teacher, as she calls it, for some of that time too, instead of just like a home teacher or a tutor. She cowardly runs back to South Carolina. By this point, she's told her friends about having AIDS, but not how she got it, and she never tells any of them that, or even that she was raped at all. You know Lou would be pissed to discover he's not dating a factory-sealed virgin. Nancy starts refusing to eat and showing obvious signs of deep depression, yet she still gets no therapy for any of her issues. She repeats a mangling of Scarlett O'Hara's famous line, "I'll think about that tomorrow." Hers is, I'll worry about that tomorrow," or "Oh, come again next never day." Like this, how many times does she say next never day instead of tomorrow? That's goofy. And so she's just repeating this mangling like a mantra rather than deal with serious issues happening today. Mommykins gave her the idea, though Nancy has never read Gone with the Wind and doesn't mention the movie, and is scared of its length. Yet we're supposed to believe this flake has such an advanced vocabulary and writes so many lines worthy of a pretentious literary novel as Nancy says, "Oh, but that book is so long." The stupid repeating of letters and words, which I thought only the under 30 set these days was doing. Like Nancy does it all the time. Long, so long. It just sounds and looks so freaking stupid. Eventually, Nancy goes back to Arizona. This is a direct quote, and I'm sorry for the offensive word. "Mom has given in to my unreasonable schizo-nagging." What? But her rectal ulcers and depression become too much to bear, and she relocates to her Aunt Thelma's ranch in Idaho as hospice care. Out in Idaho, Nancy acts like no one dying of AIDS I've ever heard of. She carries on with all her normal activities. She even goes riding horses, only wearing Depends and losing weight. Did Dr. Fraud meet anyone with AIDS, like, ever? What a happy surprise. Aunt Thelma is buddies with Dr. Fraud, and the pretended adolescent psychologist flies to the ranch on a helicopter like the grand conquering hero. I'm surprised she didn't come on a shining white horse. She's the long-awaited conquering hero who can finally answer all of Nancy's questions about AIDS. Questions she somehow never got a chance to ask any doctors or nurses. Like, go figure. This is such an obvious setup if you're reading back through the book. "Oh, I have no one to talk to. I have so many questions I can't ask anyone. Oh, hooray, happy day. Oh, I finally have someone to ask the questions to. Dr. B is great." This is such a narcissistic, egomaniacal, like megalomaniacal, like power trip. Oh, this woman just started writing herself in as this like greater and greater, like you could do no wrong, like immortal, like superhuman conquering hero. Just like gross. And oh, guess what? This is like hilarious. Go Ask Alice is also one of Nancy's favorite books, and she and Dr. B immediately bond. Nancy is thrilled to turn her journal into a book to help other kids. I'd be drunk if I took a sip every time she calls her own peers kids, and that goes for all of Dr. Fraud's other books. And then, just like Alice, Nancy randomly dies 2 days after her last entry and is conveniently buried in the woods instead of a public cemetery. Oh, so no one will be able to find out if she really existed by checking cemetery records. Oh, she's just in a private woods on someone's private ranch in the middle of nowhere. That's convenient. Even at the height of the AIDS epidemic, and I lived through that. I was born in 1979. It was that fear and the education we got at school, that was everywhere when I was a child and a preteen in the 80s and the early 90s, and even into the mid 90s too, before antiretrovirals finally seriously began reducing the death rates and stuff, because now we finally had modern medicine to give people with AIDS. We now have almost a full lifespan for them. Thank God they can live into their 70s now. But even at the height of the epidemic, people didn't die within 2 years of HIV infection. What was more common was people dying shortly after a diagnosis, or publicly admitting they were sick after years of infection, which they had no idea about. Remember, no one in the early days, I'm talking the 70s and very, very, very early 80s, knew it existed, so they wouldn't have thought to get tested or even taken precautions, because they just didn't know they had the disease. By the time it was identified in the early 80s and people started taking it seriously and knowing more things about it, it was too late, particularly without any antiretrovirals. And yet, despite all this, surprise, surprise, I still consider It Happened to Nancy one of Dr. Fraud's relatively stronger, better books. I have to give grudging credit where credit is due. She puts a bit more effort than usual into developing her protagonist and some of the other characters, and some of the passages sound almost like they came from a real teen instead of an elderly, ultra-conservative Mormon propagandist. But make no mistake, that does not mean I recommend this book, other than like a great example if you're writing like contemporary YA or any books in journal format of how not to write either of those subgenres. Like every single page is filled with examples of like what not to do, like the writing quirks, the skipping huge chunks of time, the moral judgmentalism, so many things. Like I hate this woman's books so much, but I will give her credit. Like she did have a couple that were like relatively better than others. Like they don't make me want to like DNF them and like force myself to keep choking them down to take one for the team. Like sometimes she did get like closer to a 3-star book than a 0-star book. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave me a comment letting me know, have you read any of this fraud's books? What did you think of them? Did you know they were fake before you read them? Did you like feel like angry and tricked and emotionally manipulated if you thought they were real and then found out afterwards they were fake? Have you read any other literary frauds? What do you think of literary fraud in general? Are you as angry as I am about the total like, insulting misrepresentation of what like suffering with AIDS is really like, particularly if you, like me, also like were alive during the height of the epidemic when we did not have even any antiretrovirals, even early ones like ACT. So just let me know what you guys think of it. In my next video about this book, I think will be my last one, at least for a long time. It will be general thoughts on revisiting this book after like 15 years or so. So thanks again for watching. See you soon. Bye.